Our first recipient is going to come forward, and to present his award to him is John Bryant, last year's recipient from the Joshua Group. So David, would you join us up here as well, please? I met David, I think it was about 3 years ago. I think we were probably introduced by Chuck Stiege. David was with Opportunity International for a decade or two at that point. And for any of you that read the book Mission Drift, it starts off with a story about CEO Peter Greer leaving a high-rise in Houston where this big company wanted to give him a fat 7-figure check. And they said, Peter, we're good with this. We really like what you're doing and everything, but can you just tone down the Jesus stuff a little bit? And Peter said, well, I got to go back and talk to my board, right? And as soon as he got on the plane, he didn't have to wait until he got to the board. He knew what he needed to do, and that was the whole core theme of Mission Drift, right? I've seen someone live that myself, and it's this guy right here. And I'm not sure if he's going to tell you the story or not, but that's what happened at another microfinance organization, except they didn't pull back. They went forward, and he said, I can't be part of this, right? So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you, ask you to congratulate David, and we're going to listen.
Well, good evening, and it is a delight, pleasure to participate in presenting this award to David this year. It's a little tricky because I have to speak kind of on behalf of the entire group, but 3 things came to my mind thinking about David, so I'm going to alliterate. First of all, David's inviting. He's got a very warm, gracious smile, and he greets everybody every month in the meeting. And whether you're speaking with him during the meeting, in between the meeting, if you see him at some other event, he's a very inviting, engaging person. I appreciate that about David. Secondly, he's inquisitive. We do a thing, if you're new here tonight, each month a member presents what's called a core business presentation. And David is always constantly on our backs as members to say that we should be asking clarifying questions. Being the leaders that we are, we all want to just go to answers and forget the clarifying questions. But David's inquisitive. He sticks to that script and he asks the presenter very good questions to learn more about what's underneath the surface of the core business presentation. And thirdly, he's insightful. When we get done the core business presentation, Dave passes around this microphone and we all get to give some thoughts to help the person with their questions. And I'm always amazed that Dave has like 16 things that he's already figured out. God's given him this tremendous gift of insight and to be able to articulate that very, very clearly to give the individual that's making the presentation some really practical, right-on advice. So I think I stuck to 90 seconds. Without any further ado, would you please congratulate the Joshua Group's 2018 Member of the Year, David Sims.
Back to you. Sure. John, thank you. Much too kind. There's other words for all the questions I ask. Pain in the neck comes to mind, but I appreciate the better framing of this. If you look at your program, you'll see that the topic that Dave assigned to me was investing in change. So what I'd like to do is to make sure that I use that framing as a way to try and show how what we're doing is in fact doing exactly that. But I do want to start off with a huge thank you to my Joshua Group brothers and sisters. Everybody here tonight is a world changer. We all have an opportunity to change the world in our own spheres of influence. And so while I get to accept the award this evening for this year, I hope everyone will understand that each one of us has the responsibility to change the world. I'm going to take you back in time about 20 years. I was asked a question that proved to be really a directional inflection point for me. The question was, what is my number one goal in life? I don't know if anybody's ever asked you that question, but if somebody asks you the question about what's your number one goal in your entire life, it can cause you to spend some time thinking and ruminating on that. And maybe because Covey was still pretty talked about back in that season, you may know Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Individual, but one of his is to begin with the end in mind. So this question about what's the number one goal in my life really was to frame what it is that I should be doing with lots of prayer, Bible study, input from others. I ended up in the parable of the talents, Matthew 25. I said I'd like to make sure that I live my life in such a way that when my time comes, I would hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter in the joy of your master." And if you really think about that as the goal and the destination, then the next questions are, well, what do I do today in order to be headed in that direction? I'm sure everybody in this room knows that parable, but there were 2 servants that heard that admonition and praise. They had invested. They had used the talents that they'd been given, financial and otherwise, to invest and change the world. And there was one servant who would risk nothing. He buried his talent in the ground and he was rebuked. Well, if I go back in time again to 20 years ago, the Lord had already laid on my heart a deep concern for the poor, especially in the developing world, those living on less than $2 a day. My wife and I had traveled all over the globe. There are no safety nets, no welfare programs for people there, and we knew that the Lord was calling us to do something there, and at that time I thought that meant I must be doing something more than I had been. But guess what? The Lord had wired me, as so many of you, as a business guy. I went to Wharton undergraduate, I did a master's up at Harvard, I'd started my career at Bain & Company, I'd been CEO of a company, I was at this point, as this question came, I was a senior operating committee member at MBNA, so I'm wired for business, but the Lord said, you have to do something for the least of these. What might I do? Well, let me just frame some of the situation as we find ourselves today, as we jump forward to 2018, and this group probably knows these things well, but if I just tick off 4 of the major global issues that I feel intersect the calling that I've had with this investment theme, abject poverty. There's more than 2 billion people on earth that are living on less than $3 a day. Human slavery. It's a $42 billion industry, well-organized, well-financed. It's a massive evil. Spiritual emptiness. I don't think I need to tell you all that 40% of the world has never heard the good news in the name of Jesus Christ. And lack of jobs. Those of us that are entrepreneurs and business creators understand the power of jobs to change people's lives because it gives them hope for a brighter future by giving them an income that lets them afford the things that they need in their lives and their families' lives. Well, about 1.5 years back, Dave had been kind to let me join C12 2 years ago before I knew what the Lord was leading me to do. But with some great counsel from my C12 colleagues, I launched a missional business called Impact Marketplace. And we aim to invest in change, tonight's theme for me, by helping donors invest courageous capital. We want to bring true hope, create jobs, and transform lives of the people living in poverty by connecting them to redemptive businesses that are thriving and scalable, because that can transform lives and communities. We want to tackle all 4 of those problems and more. And we do it by serving kingdom-minded donors who want to invest charitable capital into those redemptive businesses that are led by heroic business missionaries although maybe I like Paul's term better, marketplace ministers. Whatever language works for you, these are leaders like Don Larson at Sunshine Nuts, who sold everything and went to Mozambique to care for widows and orphans to build a fabulous cashew business. Beth Meadows, that we get to invest in her business in Nicaragua, she took her skills from Willow Creek Church and went down to start a grocery store business for women living on less than $2 a day, give them hope for a brighter future, and change their incomes to $6 or $10 a day. Or Greg Spencer of the Paradigm Project, one of our other heroic entrepreneurs. He's created an Avon-type model in Ethiopia and Kenya. They've sold 152,000 cook stoves, and I'll bet nobody in this room knows that there are 300,000 people a year that die or are seriously injured by fires, outdoor fires for cooking. Greg's doing something about that through business. Or Sherry Woodring at GAFCO, who's linked to World Vision. They have a bold plan. 300,000 farmers in East Africa that can benefit 775,000 children. Or the person I actually started this journey with, Stephen Freed, who's fighting human trafficking in the Philippines by creating jobs upstream from where the women and the girls can get trafficked, because if they have jobs with incomes, they don't go into Manila and bad things don't happen to them. And you can buy Dignity's virgin coconut oil right in Giant locally as they seek to transform the world in their own communities. So these business missionaries I've just mentioned each have a unique calling, and our way to help them is also unique. Donors can multiply and recycle their giving. The investments we make in each of the businesses that I've just mentioned flow back into a donor's donor-advised fund. The donor gets to have more fun reinvesting the returns over and over again in order to transform lives through business. And our vision for investing in change is to serve enough donors and redemptive businesses that we can help these enterprises bring true hope, create jobs, and help transform the lives of at least 1 million people over the next decade. The only question I have is whether that's too small a goal. That might be a David goal. That might not be big enough to be a God goal. Will you join me in praying about whether that's the right number that we should be targeting? So going back to the parable of the talent, just as I conclude, what do you think? Can I encourage you to also invest in change with all your talents and to join on the journey to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant"? Thank you again for this honor. I appreciate your vote of confidence, and I solicit your ongoing prayers for the ministries that we're responsible for. Thank you all.
David Sims.